we're talking about producers. And I thought about this today, man. And the way that Diddy is approaching this Jermaine Dupri thing, it made me go back and, because, just for people who aren't briefed up on this, Diddy basically dismissed Jermaine Dupri's versus challenge and said that he could beat him with Biggie and Mary's catalog alone. And so I'm thinking, like, because we went down the Biggie line the other day. Biggie has 2 albums, right? And I think we got out of there maybe 4 songs.
Call it three.
We'll call it 3. Are you
Yeah,
counting Born Again or are you counting the double disc?
I'm counting the double disc. It's too full on both sides to say that that's one album. That's like 2 albums. It is. I don't care what
Okay.
people say.
That's
It's
fine.
full.
So
'Cause both of those
out of
albums
Biggie's
are
3 albums, what we said Puff got maybe 4 records that he could legitimately play?
I mean, if we're okay, so if we're talking about from what I've always been taught and understood musical production on some sort of level to be, that is correct. And so I want to kind of unpack right quick. I don't want to cut you short. Was I stopping you short?
Well, I was just gonna mention the Mary stuff, and I'll get to that. Go ahead and say what you got to say, though.
I mean, I think what has happened is because Puff has been so great at so many things
Hmm.
in this business that the actual music producer has kind of gotten entailed in that. And I'm not saying that, like, Puff has one of the best ears and eyes for music ever. Like, that ain't that. I'm not arguing that.
That's an
Having that,
executive's job, though. Like I said, we could
like,
start pulling
I'm going to
people
say
like
this.
L.A. Reid in the fold or something.
So if I could just unpack it a little bit, and this is what I'm saying. So, Mike, how did he get his start? He's an A&R for Uptown for Andre Harrell.
Right,
At his heart, he's an A&R, which means he does a little bit of everything.
right.
But what I'm telling you, he does the least greatest is musical production. He's the whole deal: marketing, branding, image, eye, ear, big, rap on this beat. I don't want to rap on this beat. Big, we need to get to this money. Rap on this beat for me, please, dude. Girls, come on. Spend some time with Big. Spend some time with Big, right quick. Big, we got to make this record. We got to get this money. Like, that's him. Like Big, I'm going to take this sample. It just got cleared. Boom. Like, that's him. He's not the guy, boom, 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 bam. He's not with the guitar licks. He's not on the keyboards like, no.
Well, hold on. I want to stop though
And,
for a
and if
second.
so, when? And so all I'm saying is that when he speaks the way that he speaks on a music production level, it's like, nah, like, you're the eyes and the ears of the operation, Mike. Like, that's what you said. That's executive stuff. Like,
Exactly.
some
And
of,
see, let's look at, and not to
some of that
cut you
stuff is
off,
engineer stuff, Mike. Some of that stuff is engineer stuff. Like,
and he
take
doesn't
that
even
out.
do that though.
No, Mike. He
Yeah.
does that. Like, I've heard him. I've seen him before. Be like, no, take that out or drop that or stack. Like,
The-
no, that's engineers decide stuff like that too. Like when they're mixing down and stuff
I
too. So
agree.
it's like,
Engineers do that, but executives also do that. I was watching Clive Davis's documentary, and him and the engineer of Whitney Houston's "I Will Always Love You" were having their back and forth arguments. He was having arguments with the engineer. He ended up using the one that he wanted to, and not the engineer. The engineer is still the engineer.
okay,
But
so
I was gonna mention L.A. Reid though, right?
Mike,
L.A. Reid, go
You
ahead.
talking about I will always love you. Them some first world problems. Which one of these flawless takes are we taking? Which one of these flawless takes we taking?
No, but honestly, I heard Clive's reasoning, and he was right. You know what I'm saying? They wanted to actually make the saxophone solo longer and all that. He's like, no, we don't want anything in the way of this voice. So, yeah, I mean, I think his selection actually was right. That doesn't mean the engineer's not the engineer, but I think that the common ear can actually fix things for an engineer sometimes who's hearing things over and over. That doesn't
No,
make Puff an engineer is what I'm saying. But what I
no,
was
no,
gonna
no.
say, I was gonna bring up L.A. Reid, right? L.A.
His
Reid's an
eye is as good as his ear, though, Mike, and that's what I'm trying to get people to understand. It's not just his ear; it's his eye too. It's like it's not just what he hears; it's what he sees and how he puts it together. Like all of those things are cool. That's not the actual definition of a music producer.
well, what? All right. So how do we view somebody like a L.A. Reid who is a drummer? You know, he did that first. He's actually a musician, right?
Say what?
B,
Say what? Christian
yeah,
plays,
yeah,
plays.
yeah. L.A. Reid is a L.A. Reid's a drummer. Yes. He's an executive. He actually put Jermaine Dupri with Usher when it didn't work out with Diddy. He actually put Jermaine Dupri with Mariah Carey. That worked out. He has an ear too, sounds like. He actually put dang, I'm sorry. We were just talking about him.
Dallas.
Yes, I'm sorry. He
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
he also put Dallas with Pink, right?
Keep
That
going.
seemed to have worked out,
Keep
right?
going. Mike, I dropped the whole Dallas Austin Pink thing in the thread when people were talking about
That's what
Puff
I'm.
today in the group.
But again,
Yeah.
what does L.A. Reid not get any? I'm a producer props on that level if that's what we're talking about. Because for me, I thought Versus was about people who actually create the production, right? People who sit there and pull these things together. You're not qualifiable for this. And now I'm looking at the credits for Mary J. Blige's what's the 411? I mean, a lot of these records I gave Puff credit for, like Real Love. Puff didn't produce Real Love. Puff's name is nowhere on it. Puff's name is nowhere near You Remind Me. Love No Limit. Puff's name ain't on there unless we talk about the remix. So you talk about you'll whack somebody with Biggie and Mary stuff. What Mary stuff? One album?
Slow down, son. You're killing them.
I'm just saying, like, don't say these things about and since you mentioned
He
Q-Tip,
started it. He
yeah,
started it.
since you mentioned Q-Tip, I'm sitting here thinking
He
like,
said
what's
it's
stopping Puff from saying the same thing he said to JD to somebody like Q-Tip or to somebody
oh,
like Premier? You know what I mean?
Mike, as soon as he said your arm's too short to box with God, I said, well, we're gonna have to audit that now because like that's going too far. Like you're going too far. So he's kind of like you kind of called for this audit is what I'm saying. Because you could have said like, hey fam, I don't think it's a good like there's so many ways, and this is what I mean. He has such an eye and ear and knows how to spin things. There's so many different ways that he could have played this. And
Yeah.
it would have went away. And the fact that he didn't, it was like, well, let's audit the situation. Let's talk about what a music producer is. And it's
Right.
and it's like at its bare minimum, it's a dude that knows how to get behind the beat machine and organize the snares and the hi-hats and the bass lines and like put it in a format and like,
You know, when it's all said and done, and I want to be clear with this, I think when we're talking about hip hop executives, executive producers on that level where you're able to put people with people, I think that he's at the top there. He's basically
no.
to hip hop what L.A. Reid is to R&B in that era. And what I just mentioned with Dallas Austin being hooked up with Pink, even Dallas Austin being hooked up with Boyz II Men, like stuff like that, he knows who to put with who.
Yeah, and Mike, and this is what I mean, like, and so when he's saying that the reason that we have to audit it is because like there are actual musical producers out here who you never hear like on all levels. Like Mike, like literally about 5 miles up the street from my house is a recording studio where a producer and an engineer I know by the name of Mad Mike is in there with an artist named Lou Screw I know right now. Mad Mike's only 30 years old. He's been playing instruments since he was 14 years old. He can play instruments. He can make the beat. And he can engineer the whole track, like by himself in the studio alone. And his spit game is crazy. He just got off tour with KRS.
Oh, I remember you telling me about him.
Yeah. And so like when I hear Puff talk like that, I think about a guy like Mike who y'all don't know, and I'm like, no. My dude, Mad Mike. Mike's a producer. Mike out here playing beats, rhymes.
Puff is an executive.
I found out about him, about how dope his mixes was as an engineer. It wasn't until I got in the yo with him and my homie Lou Screw that and Mike, I was there on an executive level.
This is what I'm gonna say.
And I was looking at dude like, oh, you do that? I'm sitting in the back, Mike, like I'm OG in the studio. I'm sitting back looking at him like, oh, you play? Oh, he's like, yeah, I can. And then I'm watching him make the beat live. Then I'm watching him clean up this other track. I'm like, no, that's a producer.
Everything you're saying is furthering my notion that Puff is more Jimmy Iovine and L.A. Reid than he is Dr. Dre or JD. Because the thing is, like, as great of a producer as Dr. Dre is, they had the Chronic 2001 finished, and they wanted the next episode to be the first single. Jimmy Iovine was like, you don't have the first single yet. And because of Jimmy Iovine, we have Still DRE. And for anybody to sit there and listen to an album like 2001 and say that something's missing, that's brilliant. And that's a skill. And that's the skill that Puff has. But we're not going to sit here and act like you have that skill of actually making that record. You just know when something's missing. And
I
that's
mean,
great.
and let's also not act like Puff didn't have good like teachers and mentors. He
Yeah.
learned from some great men, and he studied the game. Well, he's a student of the game.
And when it
But
comes to L.A. Reid too, I don't know if you heard that conversation that Dallas Austin and JD were having. They kind of had like when this whole versus thing started, they got it on like a IG live, and they did it different where they were just basically trading stories for certain songs. And a lot of their songs, because they worked with LaFace, kind of freelance in that day, were based around L.A. Reid telling them like, "Yo, I need a hit for this and that." He would let them know, what song went and what song didn't go, and pretty much most of the time, he was right. Because Dallas didn't think that Blue Cantrell Hit 'Em Up style was anything, and L.A. was like, "No, we need that one."
Mike, I'm with Dallas on that. I didn't think that was anything when I first heard it too. I was like, "What's that?" I was like, "What they doing?"
Yeah.
And then that thing like blew up, and I was like, "Oh, it's like that's what it did." I was like, "Oh, well, all right, okay, my bad." Like I ain't.
And you got to think about it. These producers in the studio so much, they're hearing stuff over and over. I mean, certain things you hear, it just hits you immediately, like that's it. But sometimes it takes an outside ear, a knowledgeable ear at that, to be like, yeah, this goes.
Yeah.
But on to our next subject, man. Though, on top of that, I mean, do you think that the Diddy and JD thing's gonna happen? Because I don't think the Diddy and Dre thing's gonna happen.
The Diddy and Dre thing's not going to happen. I'm going to get to that. So are we to the versus portion of?
Yeah. Let's talk verses because we're already talking verses.
Yeah. We kind of are.
Yeah, we're already talking verses. I mean, we could still be talking about this Diddy stuff while we're talking verses.
No. That's in there. JD versus Diddy makes that list because he said your arms are too short to box with God, and so I want JD to go box with God.
I want JD to go box with God too. Do it for the city.